Oh yeah. Oh, there you go. You're going to Come on. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know you. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bamboo. Yeah. Safe. Oh god. Yes, and No, puppet. They have this. I need a wither skin. Oh. No. Ready. Eight, nine. Whoa. I have no idea where. Oh no. No. Yes.
Today. And from there, you'll click on it and you'll watch it until 10 o'clock. In the chat is our schedule for today. So if you're meeting with teachers at, say, first or second period, make sure to look at the schedule. So first period will be 10:05, second period will be 10:45, and so forth. Really, just really make sure to watch it. I'm gonna assume that you're going to watch the video in the assembly because it's about Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And so it's going to be really informational. All the videos we've gotten, or not necessarily videos, assemblies, because they're all live, have been really good. So yeah, so I'll paste it in the chat. Once you, click on the Teams link, you're welcome to head out. If you can't see it, let me know and I can help redirect you. And I'm doing this because you'll have much better video quality watching it on your own computer than through my computer. I'm gonna see my okay. Oh, I didn't send it. I didn't hit the send button. There we go. Okay, so please click on the link and enjoy the assembly. Once you welcome to head out. Oh, that's me. It's playing. Hold on. I don't know where it's playing at. It's in one of my tabs. Where is it? Okay. It was in Teams? Huh. So the assembly's starting like now-ish. Right now they're doing the, what is it? The ASB representative. So you also want to see that. Aaron Batho, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, do you know what you need to do? So in the chat, there's a link for the assembly today, because I want you to be able to enjoy the video, or not necessarily the video because it's live. Click on the link and then you're welcome to leave the homeroom meeting. And then so that goes until 10, and then in the chat is also our modified schedule for today. Damien, are you there?
No.
Okay, do you know what you need to do?
I never felt Chinese enough because I didn't speak Cantonese like the rest of my family. And I never felt Caucasian enough because my friends would come over and we'd be eating, things that are very specific to Chinese American homes, like chicken feet or chili pepper cuttlefish and stuff like that. And so I never felt like I fit in either area. And I think with the advent of a special month just dedicated to APA awareness, I think that's something that I really could have used. Because when I grew up, I couldn't look out there in sports, in music, in television, in film, and see other Asian Americans, people that I could look up to, people that I could see that they had achieved a certain amount of success, and then feel comfortable in my own skin and feel that I could follow that path to success. So here we are, and I'm super excited about it. I'm here to talk a little bit about my first novel, Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet. I love that I'm here speaking to students in a school. It's also a little strange because I never thought I would grow up and become somebody's homework. So I have very mixed feelings about this. And I know some of you have read it, some of you have just heard of it, some of you will read it. It's a very popular book in the Seattle area, so I think sometime between now and when you graduate from high school, you're going to read it. So it's kind of relatable. And I have a weird, I can't quite get my brain around that concept. And how it began for me was really summer reading. It wasn't like I woke up one day and my book was being read in schools. It was this very slow, creeping, organic thing. And what would happen is it was assigned for summer reading, and some teachers would like it, some students would like it, and then it just sort of spread organically all around the country. And the way I became aware of this was when I started to get emails from students. So I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know students were reading this book until one late August. And I began to get probably 20 emails per day from students who had been assigned my book. And I raised a household of teenagers. I know how summer reading tends to work is you're assigned your summer reading list. It goes in your backpack goes in your closet on the last day of school. It collects dust all summer long, and then like a week before school starts, you text your friends and you're like, what are we supposed to read? And then they go, everyone goes to a website like sparknotes.com or something like that. And I'm not there. And so there's this collective shriek from students all over the country when they don't find the easy answers online, but they find me online. And so they email me. And so now every year I get this avalanche of emails, all to do with this book. And they say these wonderful things like, Mr. Ford, I loved your book. Motel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet is my all-time favorite book. And if you could just answer these 12 questions, I'd appreciate it. And I never give anyone the answers, but I do reply and give them a boost of encouragement. But this whole thing became really, really unusual when my own children were assigned to read my book in school. And my daughter was in the 9th grade, and it's not cool when your dad is homework. And so she was assigned, hotel, and she just groaned about doing this. And then she's getting texts from all her friends like, haha, I'm reading your dad's book. And what she did is she went out onto Twitter and she found all these tweets from students who were reading my book. And because she found endless joy sharing these tweets with me, I'm just going to share a couple of these tweets with you. If you'll just bear with me. And these are tweets, actual tweets from actual students. This tweet is from Mariah Cobb, and she tweets, "Nobody read Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet. They'll slowly tear out your heart and you'll cry your eyes out. Hashtag stupid English class." That's lovely. This one is from Nicholas Reed, and he tweets, and this is in all caps. So Nicholas is very excited. And he says, "Who has a study guide for Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet? SparkNotes didn't have it. Hashtag emergency." So this could be you. This one is from Morgan Gaccioni. And Morgan tweets, "Anyone want to give me a good summary of Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet? I'm willing to pay in cash." So, enterprising out there. This one is from Alana, and I love it because her Twitter handle is Banana Alana, which is very sweet. And yet she is tweeting, "I would rather read Animal Farm every day of my whole life than read Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet." So, just hits you right there. And this last one, I just have to share it with you. It's from Emma, and she tweets, more like Hotel on the Corner of This Book Sucks Boulevard, which I just find it so hilarious. Because when I was a young student, I probably had a similar reaction. It took me a while until I found a certain book that really spoke to me, that that really invited me into a world of reading, of literature, of story. And so I do get a lot of emails now that the book's been out there, or text messages as they were, that are more of this variety, where it's, and this is from a young man, and his Twitter photo, he's wearing his football jersey, so he probably just made varsity or something like that. And he says, "This is the first time I was forced to read a book that I actually loved." And it's nice to be a best-selling author and all that, but that's a huge compliment. So if I can break through to what I call a resistant reader, and there are probably a fair number of you out there that are like, "What? I have a book, I'd rather play Fortnite," that kind of a thing. I was kind of that kid as well, so I understand that. But it wasn't because books were not something I could get into. I just hadn't found the right book for me. And so if I could be the right book for some of you out there, that's a huge badge for me. It's something that I really cherish. But particularly this book, because I am half Chinese, and my book is about the Asian American experience. My main characters are Chinese and Japanese and Black. It's a story that, maybe not the story itself, but its perspective, its point of view, is one that hasn't been robustly explored in our culture. And so the book found a certain place, not just in schools, but in in the hearts of readers. And that's been interesting to see, because I really set out to write this book as the book deals with a lot of heavy subjects. It deals with the Asian American experience of Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans. It deals with the Japanese internment, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It really deals with race relations of every variety. But I really sat down, and my first intention was to write a love story. And let me repeat that, a love story. And when I say love story, especially in a school environment, it's very divisive. There's usually the young women in the audience who have read John Green or seen maybe Fault in Your Stars, and they're like, "Oh, love story." And then there's like the young dudes who are like, "Oh no, we're talking about love stories." And to you young dudes out there, don't be afraid of love stories. They can be your best friend, and they can really kind of expand your emotional horizons. And that's what I'm all about. I don't just look at myself as an author. I look at myself as someone who's in the compassion creation business. And looking around out there in the big world, or you could look on Twitter or whatever environment, there's a shortage of compassion. And so I think by writing a book that addresses the Asian American experience and tells a story that hasn't been told and retold and retold and retold, like the Fast and the Furious 12 or whatever that franchise is up to now, it becomes something unique and special. And you inject that book into the bloodstream of our society, and you can inoculate society to a small degree against prejudice and racism and sexism and homophobia and a lot of the things that are super divisive that just create such grief for all of us. So I set out to write this love story, and this is a love story from a young Chinese American boy who's about 12 and a young Japanese American girl of the same age. Their names are Henry and Keiko. And after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, as the United States is entering World War II, these two Asian American children are sent to an all-white private school. And they're sent by their parents so that they can become more American, whatever that is. And that definition is a whole other stream of discussion worthy of going through. But they go to the school for the same reasons. And together they form this very simple affection. They're both 12. It's a very innocent love story. And you're all in the Seattle area, so this will not come as a surprise to most of you. But Seattle has an institutional memory of the Japanese internment. And so we have these two characters, and what's going to happen in the book is this young girl, Keiko's family, the entire Japanese American community in Washington State is going to be rounded up, and they're going to be put on trains and buses, and they're going to be sent to Minidoka, Idaho, to an internment camp. And so, they're sent there for their protection, even though the machine guns point in and not out. And so Keiko and her family is sent there, and it splits apart Henry and Keiko. So it becomes this story of this long-lost love, this long-lost friendship. And it's also the story of this boy, Henry, as a grown man now. He's in his 50s, and he's this guy that's he hasn't fixed the broken pieces of his past. And he's walking down the street in Seattle through the International District, and he passes an old hotel, the Panama Hotel, which is a very real hotel. You can go there tonight. And as he's passing the hotel, the new owner has discovered all these belongings in the basement, and all of these belongings were put there by Japanese Americans as they were taken away from internment camps. So they took all of their most precious belongings, their photos, their things that mean the most to them, and they store them there. And they remain there 40 years later. And those items are still in the Panama Hotel basement today. And as these things are coming up from the basement in the book, Henry, as a grown man, sees something that he recognizes as belonging to Keiko, and it forces him to reconcile the past and the present, and to think about the things he did or didn't do, or the things he said, and all the things he left unspoken about that time. And I won't go on much further with the plot of the book. I don't want to, spoiler alert, I don't want to give away the ending or anything like that. But that's the gist of what the book is about. I grew up in the Seattle area. I am Asian American. I had Japanese American friends. Wasn't I paid special awareness to, but in my history book, whenever there was a bit of Asian American history, I recognized it. I noticed it. It's like if you're playing that game where you recognize Volkswagen bugs, and as soon as you're playing it, you notice all of them on the street. Just because I was Japanese American, and there was so little representation in our history books, whenever there was some, I remembered it. But by and large, because the descendants of those families that were taken to internment camps, and many of those people are still alive in their 80s and 90s, Seattle has a memory of the Japanese internment. If you move to the eastern side of the United States, that memory diminishes. And so my first book tour I did in Chicago, and a woman came up to me and said, I'm a retired high school history teacher. I had no idea this happened. And it's because there was an embargo on this information for a generation that was left out of history books. It was not widely discussed. And when it comes to Asian American history, and American history in general, I really feel that some history is just more important than others. And this is just a little test. I can't hear you, I can't see you raising your hand or not, but I'm just going to ask this question and answer it to yourself. The cotton gin was invented by, many of you out there will say Eli Whitney. It's this thing that every generation goes through school, and it's one of these little factoids that we all remember, that the cotton gin was invented by by Whitney. But if we forget that the cotton gin was invented by Whitney, we're not really diminished as a people. But if we forget that we incarcerated 120,000 Japanese Americans, if we forget that, then we are diminished as a people, and we're losing something. And so I do think that this month in particular, APA History Month, Asian American Pacific Island History Month, is super important because there are so many stories that haven't been told. And those stories are based in truth. This is not Lord of the Rings. This is things that happen to people that live and breathe and walk among us today. And so it's important that we remember, we respect, understand that history so we don't repeat those same mistakes. After the bombing of 9/11, there were politicians who wanted to incarcerate all Muslim Americans for their safety, because, again, even though they would be prisoners. And I think there will always be hard-hearted people who react in an unkind way in a very fearful situation. And it is unbeneficial to certain people just because of the color of their skin or where they worship or who they are. And so this type of month is, it's really important to me. One question that comes up a lot is, in the book, Hotel on the Corner, Bitter and Sweet, how much of this story is my story? I know a lot of authors, and there's a saying, as a writer, you prick your finger and you bleed onto the page. And this book is more of a heart transplant for me. There's a lot of me in this book. The main character, Henry, I relate to him a lot. But in many ways, this is my dad's story. My dad was 12 at the time of Pearl Harbor. My dad was Chinese American, and he was given a button to wear that read, "I am Chinese," because he would walk to school and the white kids would throw rocks at him, thinking he was Japanese, thinking he was the enemy. And it was this very complex, confounding time. And I'm going to say something, and maybe as students who may not quite relate to this, the parents out there, I think this one's for you, but as a writer, I've learned that, and this was, I think this was a quote, I'm paraphrasing, but a quote by Bruce Springsteen, who's a wonderful musician, but he said, the people in our lives that, for whom we don't get enough love, attention, or support, or whatever, where there's a deficit of something, those are the people that as we grow up, we emulate. And my dad died way too soon. And so having lost my dad, I found that when I write, I'm writing in my dad's voice. And my dad's voice is that of a young Chinese American boy and man trying to find his place in society. And it's wonderful now because we have a month that celebrates Asian Americans, and we're out there. I mean, just off the top of my head, there's Andrew Yang, who ran for president. Aquafina is a great musician. Kamala Harris, Mindy Kaling, who's in Parks and Rec. Chloe Kim won a gold medal in the last Olympics for snowboarding. Jeremy Lin's a basketball star. Kelly Marie Tan was in Star Wars. Bruno Mars, Filipino, Asian American. Kevin Lim invented Twitch. There's Yo-Yo Ma, the great cellist. There's been so much contribution to our country and our society from Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Island Americans, and we don't always recognize or remember. So this gives us an opportunity to really embrace that. And as I said, when I was a kid, this is what I needed. And so now, as students, you may take it for granted, but enjoy it because it took a long time to get here. I really should open this up for Q&A because it's much more fun to answer questions. So be thinking of your questions. And I love Q&A. I'm totally open. I've visited a lot of schools, and so I've answered questions like, "What's your favorite karaoke song? How many cars do you own?" Like I've questions about the book, about my childhood, about being Asian American. I'm really open to everything. But before we jump into Q&A, it's something that I like to say in every school environment. And in every school if you take 100 students in middle school or high school, if you take 100 students, there are going to be 3% of those students for whom school is not a party. School is not a wonderful social event. School is not the next home run to be hit. School is something to be endured. School is something you struggle through. School is something you survive. And so if there are 1,000 of you out there, there's probably 30 of you who know exactly what I'm talking, and you know what that feels like. And for those of you that get this, I get it because I was you. And for me, school was a struggle. School was something that I would not want to redo. It wasn't absolutely horrible, but it wasn't wonderful. And for those of you out there for whom school is you wake up and you don't want to go to school, not because it's a test, or not because you don't want to do book report, just because the social circumstances are not where you want to be. I can tell you, you'll get through it. I got through it, and the world is made a better place by late bloomers. And I was a late bloomer, and I guarantee you, when you get through it, you will have your time in the spotlight. So don't be afraid to be a late bloomer, and better times are ahead, I promise. So anyway, with that, let's answer some questions. I should look over here and see a question. I'm going to head into this chat window. As you can see, I can go on and on, but I would much rather have a dialogue. I would much rather answer your questions about the book, writing, whatever.
All right, so everyone, please type in any questions you have in either the Q&A portion or your homeroom's chat, so your homeroom teacher can type them into the Q&A portion. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. So our first question for you is, how long does it standardly take you to write a novel?
Ooh, good question. My first book took about a year. My second book took about 2 years, and my third book took about 3 years. And I think the reason is I'm getting better as a writer, and so I'm more aware of my own mistakes, and it just takes me a little bit longer. And also, I have readers and fans who I feel a little bit more self-conscious of my work, and so I spend a lot more time on it. But somewhere between a year to 2 years, that's about the right time. It sounds like a long time, but honestly, anyone out there ever wants to write a book, and out in this group, I know there are writers and poets and people that want to create manga, people that create the worlds for role-playing games, which is just another form of story. If you can write 3 pages in a day, and you do that for like 3 months, you have a book. That's how long it takes. And I visited a high school in Duluth, Minnesota, and there was a young girl. She was either a freshman or a sophomore, but she was 16 years old. And she said that she had her book was being published. And I'm like, oh, okay, you must have written a book and you printed it out. And then she began talking about her agent. I'm like, wait a minute. And she, I think this was Simon & Schuster, a major publisher. At age 16, she wrote and sold a young adult novel for $250,000. And so some people just hit it out of the park at their first time at that. And people like me have to keep at it for many years. But if anyone out there is curious about writing, wants to explore their creative side, I highly encourage it, because we need the next great writer. J.K. Rowling is going to die eventually. Stephanie Meyers is going to die. I'm going to die. John Green's going to die. Eventually, there needs to be another generation of great writers, and it might as well be you. Next question.
Cool, cool. So for our next question, how did you research for the hotel on the corner of Bitter and Sweets?
Oh, research. It's really weird because when I was your age, if someone said research, I would just be like, what? Like, I didn't envision that I would enjoy research. And the best way I can describe research is if you go to like Wikipedia and you're looking for a specific answer, but then you click on something that leads to something else, and your own interest leads you down this rabbit hole. That's kind of what research is for me. And now that I have a book out, you know, before I didn't have a book, and then I would go to museums and historical societies, and they just thought I was a crazy person. But now that I have a book, and it's a fairly well recognized book, especially in Washington State, they give me access to a lot of their archives. And that's been amazing because you find all these, it's like turning over a rock and looking at the squishy things underneath. There's all these secrets that we as a society either bury on purpose or just pave over in our, the speed with which we go on to the next modernization of our society. We forget a lot. And so for hotel, I joined the Densho Foundation, which reports oral history of the internment. I went to Minidoka, Idaho, which is where the internment camp was. Did a lot of research at the Wing Asian Museum, which is down in the ID. Museum of History and Industries. There's a lot of museums that you've probably gone to on a field trip. I went there, but they let me go in the basement. But there's just tons of stuff. And I put on these white gloves, and I feel like I'm going into, an ancient pyramid looking for treasure. And I interviewed lots of people. Firsthand information is always the best way to do it. So that's just one part of research. There's a ton of other things, but for the most part, it encapsulates it. Next question.
That's super cool. So the next question is, what is your favorite book that you've ever read?
Ooh, favorite book that I've ever read. I'm a big graphic novel guy. And so probably my top three. The number one spot kind of rotates depending on where I am at that point in my life. But a perennial top three is a graphic novel called Blankets by Craig Thompson. I wish I had it here. I have it downstairs. Beautifully written and drawn. Craig Thompson is a writer, graphic artist, illustrator. He's based out of Portland. It's a great book. And I could talk about that book at length, but it's kind of a coming of age story. I think it would be very popular with anyone in upper middle school and high school, probably very popular in college as well. And if anyone reads comics or manga, graphic novels, it's totally in your wheelhouse. It's totally something to be into. And even if you're not into graphic novels, this is a graphic novel you'll love. So, Blankets by Craig Thompson. And it's a love story. Sorry, I just keep that
That sounds very fun. Maybe I want to read that too.
It's good.
All right. So for our fourth question, fifth, sorry. Do you have advice to students who don't feel like they are good at writing?
Oh yeah. Just quit. Give up. There's no hope for you. No. Come back. I'm kidding. Don't be afraid to fail. Give yourself permission to fail. I think people that never give themselves permission to fail, for whatever reason, they don't try, and then they don't achieve, their goals and their dreams, and they don't get where they want to be because they don't even get out of they don't even get on that path. They don't set their foot. They don't even begin the journey. For writing, and I know many of you out there play a musical instrument. Some of you play because you're a band or you're an orchestra, and you had to do that, and it was either that or choir. But then there are some of you who take private violin lessons and piano lessons, and you're really good at you're really good at your craft. And it is a craft. You don't sit down at the piano and try to play Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky. you sit down at the piano and you start with something really simple in scales, and you're playing, you know, children's songs, and then you work your way up to something harder and harder and harder. And along the way, you have some really bad notes. I mean, you're practicing, and it's just like, ouch, that sounds bad. And some people quit. And then some people accept that you're going to have a few bad notes on the way to greatness. And it's the same thing with writing. I think a lot of people, you know, they read a book and they love this book and they want to write a book just like that. And they sit down, and when they can't do it, they're like, guess I'm not a writer. And that's not how it works. You really have to put the time in, and you have to love it, because it's a lot of work. But if you love what you do, it stops feeling like work, and it feels like this other thing. You're creating art, and you know, that's a good place to be. So my biggest advice is just don't be afraid to fail. Give yourself permission to fail. Have some bad notes, and know that it's not always going to sound like that. So that's my answer.
So, next question is, how old were you when you knew you wanted to be a writer?
So I laughed nervously. At a really young age, like 5th grade, I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was my goal, my dream. I later went to art school, and I always had better ideas than I could actually draw. And that led to me being more of a storyteller and being more of a writer. Along the way, I wrote some of the worst poetry any human being has ever written. Like, there's an Olympic medal for bad poetry. I won the gold, silver, and the bronze. But that's where I was, and I still write poetry, and I still love poetry. And so we still have things, you know, we struggle at. But when I was a young kid, seriously, like 5th grade, my world changed. So like 5th grade is when I had a crush. I didn't have a crush on one girl. I had a crush on a set of twins. And the two twins, Heather and Holly, they had simultaneous crushes on my best friend, Sean. So I had a crush, and then I had my heart broken, you know, at age 12 or whatever like that. And I remember being a 5th grader or a 6th grader, I can't remember. And it was like one week, I'm just thinking about like sports and comic books and video games, and that's my whole universe. And then the next week, I'm walking around the playground just like, love sucks. You know, I was just crushed. And there's something really magical about that moment where you become aware of grown-up emotions. And for some of us, it's when we're in the 6th grade. Some of us were a senior. Some of us were 40 years old. We all cross that threshold at some point where you have your heart broken. And I wanted to write about that. I just had, you know, I was probably an emo kid before they had the name for emo kids. And I just had an overabundance of emotion that spilled out onto the page. And that was a good canvas for me to process those things. And that's when I really wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an artist too. My dad wanted me to be an artist, and my mom wanted me to be a writer, so I kind of did both. That's a good question.
All right, for our next question, it is, did you come up with the title before or after the story?
It's an interesting question. When I was in high school, I had a friend named Neil, and he had a notebook, and it was filled with titles. There were all the titles of stories and books he was going to write. And he had a title. It was a cool title. He knew what that story was about. Boom. I don't know if he ever wrote all those, but it was, you know, it was a fun exercise. I'm the opposite. I just have a working title, and sometimes it's just, you know, new book. I don't know what it is going to be. and I name my babies after their born. That's how I feel about it. Once the book's done and I can look at it, then I can give it a name. And so I always name my books at the end, which is, in retrospect, it's not the best thing, because by the time I finish a book, I'm kind of mentally exhausted, and then having to come up with a unique and clever name and to defend that to my editor and stuff like that is, it's just an extra lap around the track that I wasn't ready for. But that's how I've always done it. It just feels like once the book is done, I really know what it's about. Sometimes I'll start writing a book and I think it's about this. And by the time it's done, it's really about this. That I've just sort of processed a lot of things along the way. And so, the name might have to change. So I don't invest a lot of time in the naming up front. I do it all at the end. For right or wrong. And
Okay.
every author has a different way of doing it. So whatever I do is just what I do. But everyone has their own way.
So our next question is going to be, who do you think is someone who has really helped the Asian American community be recognized and appreciated?
Who do I think currently is helping? I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So who is someone who has really helped the Asian American community be recognized and appreciated, like in now time or in the past?
Yeah, historically, there have been creative outliers or political outliers. And so there was the first Chinese man that graduated from Yale University, and I think it was around like 1812 and stuff like that. So there are people like that, but they're kind of forgotten in history. So I think it's a better exercise to look at contemporary people right now. And people don't think of there are some people that who they are, they become iconic, and they are their own thing, and people forget that they are Asian or Pacific Islander. So someone like that would be Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, who he's Samoan, he's Pacific Islander, but he's like his own thing. And so people kind of forget that he is part of this beautiful tapestry of people and culture that we're celebrating this month. Kamala Harris, Vice President, is someone that we think of her as Vice President, but we forget that, she comes from two different cultures and is this beautiful combination expressed here in America. People that, that are, there's a ton of people in business and medicine in Silicon Valley, creating apps and founding companies. And, I could name them and you would be familiar with them, like Twitch. Like probably those of you who use Twitch had no idea that Kevin Lin, second generation Asian American, is one of the creators of Twitch. And so Asian Americans have always contributed to tech, to medicine, to to business and finance and all of those things. But the Asian Americans that we see and recognize in film, basically in entertainment and sports, we see them often enough that they become a household name. Like George Takei, who, when I grew up, he was Sulu in Star Trek, and now he's this incredible activist. He's in his 80s, and George, when he was about 4 years old, went to an internment camp with his family. Andrew Yang, who ran for president, he was super visible. Let me think of who else. I think I mentioned Chloe Zhao, who just won, the Oscar for Best Film and Best Screenplay. And actually, Chloe will still be a Chinese citizen, so I can cross her from the list. But you know what I mean. Historically, it was always like the breakthrough person in entertainment was Bruce Lee. Decades ago, martial artist. And before that, if you watched movies from like the 70s back, if there was ever an Asian American person, half the time they were played by a white person with makeup, and they called it yellowface. And so the leading roles for Asian American actors went to white people. And that was just an accepted practice. And when there was an Asian American actor on screen, they were always in a subservient role. They were a servant. They were always in the background. And Bruce Lee was the first. He's from Seattle, went to the University of Washington. Was the first guy to really break through that. And his legacy was so large, he almost created this stereotype that other people had a hard time getting away from. And yeah, George Takei, who was in the original Star Trek, to see an Asian American on screen in a leadership role was, in the 60s, was just mind-blowing. It had never been done before. And people like that really kick down the doors for the next generation of great actors that we now watch and see and just accept. But it wasn't always like that. People had to really fight to be seen and recognized as something other than, a token servant on screen or something like that. My own grandfather was an extra in Hollywood. He was in probably 300 films, just as an extra. And there's pictures of him on set. And there's a bunch of Asian American actors as soldiers, and then the commander is a white guy. The actor named Barner Owen is Swedish, and he's dressed up in yellowface, like the Fu Manchu mustache and all that stuff. And it's bizarre to think that was the norm for ever until the 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's a good question. A long answer for a very short question, but thanks for asking it.
Yeah, very cool. Our next question for you is, what is your favorite book that you've written?
Favorite book that I've written? It would probably be my second book. I've written 5 books. I've published 3. I've written 6 books now. I've published 3 and I'm about to publish my 4th. My second book, which I quite handy, is a book called Songs of Willow Frost. And that one's just really personal. I mean, all my books are personal, but that one's really personal for me. And it's my least known book, but it's the one that means the most to me. And sometimes when you write, when you create art, I try not to create something for everyone. I want to create everything for someone. And Songs of Willow Frost is a very specific book, and there are people that don't care for it, and then there are people that absolutely love it because it just hits home for them. And it's the kind of book that hit home for me. I've had short stories that I really like. I've had short stories that I'm not, I look back and I'm like, oh, did I write that? But I have some short stories that for lack of a better word, I'm really proud of, because I learned through the process, and I feel like I became a better writer through the process. It's almost short stories. It's almost like if you're a recording artist and you have, a great song versus a great album. And so, Songs of Willow Frost is my album, and then I have a bunch of other songs that are near and dear to me that are just kind of scattered out. That's a good question.
Yeah. So next question is, what is your writing process, and what does it look like?
What is my writing process? I have to just say, every writer is different, and so what I do may work for you, may not work for you. There are really 2 modalities of writing. There are plotters and pantsers. By that I mean there are plotters who, I have friends who are very successful authors, and they will write a 30-page outline for a book, chapter by chapter. They know everything that's going to happen. And then there are pantsers. They say that because they write by the seat of their pants. They're just going for it, commando style. And they sit down with a blank page and they just start typing. And you know, plotting everything out is probably the smarter way to go, but it removes the discovery of it. When you're writing, suddenly you're like, oh, what if I do this? And when you plot it all out, you miss out on that. And I kind of live for those moments. And then just to go for it freestyle, I can do that, but I get about 80 pages written and I'm just lost. And I describe that as like if you get in the car and you just go drive, but you have no destination. Like you can get really far, but you don't know where or why. And I'm kind of in the middle, so I come up with a kind of a concept or an idea, and then I really think of a starting point and a stopping point, where the book begins and how the book ends. And with all my books, I know how they're going to end before I even start writing a single sentence. And that ending becomes really important. That's like if this was a compass, that's north, and I'm writing towards that ending. And that's how I do it. I may plot 3 or 4 chapters ahead, but I don't plot out everything. It's just too much. It ruins kind of the fun for me. And other people, they do it completely differently. There's no real right or wrong way. There's just the way that is most effective for you. And even the way I do it may not be the most effective for me. I may learn a new way to do it. The new book I have coming out, like Hotel in the Corner Bitter and Sweet, it has 2 time periods that it bounces around. My new book has 6 time periods, and it's all over the place, and it's so complex. It's a big box of crayons. It's so complex that I really had to really be aware if I'm plotting things out, which I don't normally do. So I kind of adjust my skills to, the terrain the same way like a mountaineer. You adjust your skills to the height and size and danger of the mountain. So that's my answer.
Yeah. What is so for the next question, what is your message to young Asian Americans?
The message to young Asian Americans. I guess it would be, and I mean, this is really speaking to all of the students out there. You're at an age where you're trying to figure out who you are. You are, the child of your parents, so you're a bit of them, but really, who are you? Where do you fit in? Growing up, just sort of figuring out who you are is challenging enough if you're just, the mean average, if you're just Caucasian. But when you are a different ethnicity or a different, any kind of distinction of different that is outside of the norm, it makes it a little harder to figure out who you are. For me, I lived in Hawaii for 6 years, and I was half Chinese, and I still couldn't figure it out. And then I went to Hawaii, and there's just every mix of people you could imagine. And then I felt comfortable in my own skin, and I really got a handle of who I was and what I was about. And I appreciated my family, their struggles, and then I saw the world differently. And I think months like this, and some people are like, okay, it's Asian Pacific American Islander Heritage Month, so what? For some people, it is kind of a so what. If you're a Caucasian person, you may not care that much. If you have, a decent amount of empathy, you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to appreciate these people. Their struggles are different than mine, and that's cool. And that builds kind of an emotional bridge. But if you are Asian American, this is a moment of reflection. You can look around and go, oh, we have our own space in this country, in this society. We are successful here. We are successful there. We can take pride in who you are instead of feeling lesser because you're not like everyone else. And so, my words of advice, a couple things. There's like the one internal, and then there's kind of a practical. The internal one is, just look around. You belong here. You're important. You're unique. And that uniqueness is a superpower. It's not a weakness. When you're in school, you think all the ways that make you different are weaknesses. When you grow up, you realize they're your superpowers, and you'll understand. But the other thing is, if you're Asian American, interview your parents or your grandparents, because, and it's really hard to do, and I know you don't want to do it, but when I was your age, it was probably the last thing I wanted to do was sit down with my dad and be like, okay, tell me about your childhood, and what was the worst thing you ever encountered? What was the best thing? Or with your grandparents. But once those people in our lives are gone, you can't ask those questions anymore, and you will wonder for the rest of your life. So, take a moment this weekend and just ask your Asian American parents a little bit about their story, because they will astonish you with the things that the circumstances they have to navigate to get where they are today. I guarantee you. And those are stories that you'll want to know because they define them and they define you. So anyway, that's my big advice right there. Do it. No one's going to do it, but I hope some of you do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jamie, for spending your morning with us today. We really appreciate it. Eagles, remember to follow the assembly schedule for the rest of the day. And thank you again to Jamie, and have a great day, Eagles.
You too. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
here.